So welcome everyone to the Ward 1 and 8 NPA meeting. I'm one of the two steering committee members. Richard Hilliard is the other. I'm going to ask that we just go around the room and quickly introduce ourselves, not your life story, but just a sentence or so about who you are and what brings you here tonight. And we'll try to do that fairly quickly, but just to have a sense of who's in the room.
Richard Hilliard, I live on Highgrove Court in Ward 1, and I also pass along regrets from Jared Wood, who would like to be here.
Sophie Quest from the Old East End Neighborhood Coalition. I live on Chase Street.
Jean Hopkins, East Ave, co-housing.
Thanks, Jean. My name is Richard Dean. I'm the East District City Councilor seeking re-election, and I live on Brooks Avenue.
My name is Mark Hughes. I live down on Riverside. I've only been here about a month. I am the executive director of Justice for All, and we're also the anchor organization of the Racial Justice Alliance. So I just came to listen.
Hi, good evening. I'm Sharon Busher. I'm Ward 1's. I'm sorry. I'm Ward 1's city councilor, and I live on East Avenue.
Hello, everybody. My name is Adam Roof. I'm the Ward 8 City Councilor, and I live on Pearl Street.
Hi, I'm Maria McClellan. I work at UVM Medical Center.
Hi, I'm Sarah Dopp. Same. Whoops.
Hi, I'm Carol Livingston. I live on Calarco Court, which is down the hill.
Hi, I'm Jack Hanson. I live on Pearl Street, and I'm one of the candidates for East District City Council.
Hi, my name is Pet Kiomarivan. I am CEDO staff and also NPA support.
I'm Hannah Carpino. I'm a CEDO intern.
I'm Michael Long. I live on Henry Street.
Karen Long, Henry Street.
I'm Walter Cady. I live on Elmwood Avenue, but I'm hoping to speak about some ballot items.
Sandy Wynn, Mansfield Ave.
Linda Sheehy, Mansfield Ave.
I'm Keith Pillsbury. I live on University Terrace, and I'm in Ward 8, School Commissioner.
Kathy Alwell, North Prospect Street, and I am the East District School Commissioner running for re-election.
I'm Angie Chappell-Sokol on North Prospect Street.
Alex Friend. I live on Henry Street. I'm a planning commissioner, but that's not why I'm here tonight.
So we didn't get our two videographers. So Charlie and Cyril.
Hi, I'm Charlie G from CCTV, Channel 17.
Cyril Flash off of East Avenue.
Anybody come in while we were going around? Okay, welcome everybody. It's great to see such a good group here tonight. So the agenda is we're going to have Speak Out, which is just an opportunity to say what's on your mind, have a conversation about anything that you think that this group ought to be thinking about and conversing about. At 7:25 or so, we'll have a conversation between the two candidates for the East District for City Council. Then we'll have remarks from, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped the city councilors will give updates as to what's happening in city council. Then the candidate for school commissioner, who I believe is unopposed, will speak to what her thoughts are in terms of her candidacy. The school district will come to do a budget presentation, and the mayor may be here, but I think that's not sure, but he
should definitely
maybe.
be here by 9 o'clock to speak to city ballot items. He apologizes for not being able to be here earlier. He has conflicting engagements, but he earnestly requests that people stay to listen to his advocacy for some city ballot items.
So let me get a sense of how many people want to say something during Speak Out. Okay. Okay, great. So I think I'd like to start with Maria, if that's okay. Yeah.
Thank you. I want to take a moment to recognize a colleague of mine from the medical center. I would like her to stand. Sharon Busher, please stand. And I want to invite my colleague Sarah Dopp to make this presentation alongside of me. So Sarah and Sharon started together in the lab at UVM Medical Center in the late 1960s, if I have my math right. And I'm not a lab expert, but I've learned a lot in the last week learning about Sharon's career from Sarah. But they both started as general medical technologists, and Sharon was 22 years old. And on February 8th, she retired after 50 years at the medical center. And that is a long 5 decades of service. And I just want to, bear with me, I want to just say a few things about that service. She started as a generalist, as I mentioned. Come on over here, Sharon. And she found her niche in immunology and blood banking in the lab. And something that she did that was very important for our patients is that in the 1970s, she wanted the medical center to have the capability to match tissue for organ donors to potential recipients. And she led that process, working with immunologists at the medical school and pathologists at the hospital. And this was a very big accomplishment and one that I think Sharon really should be recognized for. She is known in her career for being meticulous, thorough, and willing to question things, which I will come back to later, which I think you can thread through her city council career as well. She questions things because she wants to get the best solution. And I think she wants the best solution for all parties. And if that means bumping up against authority or bumping up against others, she's been willing to do it for the good of the whole and for the good of patients, and I think for the good of her constituents. I want to just tell a little story that how I met Sharon back in the day. When I got here in the late 1990s and early 2000s, everybody knows we were building an expansion for the hospital, the ambulatory care center. And Sharon and Chapin Spencer, who were the city councilors at that time, I spent a lot of quality time with them while they pushed to reduce the number of parking spaces on our campus to ensure that they could minimize the impact on the neighborhood. And throughout that process, Sharon put the needs of her constituents first. She didn't mind pushing back on her employer. She did the right thing, and we got to a good solution, and that was my introduction to working with Sharon. I wanted to wrap up by just thanking Sharon for all the value she has brought to this organization over 50 years. And I know her personally to be an honest person, to be a caring person, to be a hardworking person. I'm not sure how she stays up so late at all the meetings that she does. I don't think I could do that. I know I couldn't do that. But I have appreciated working with her. Other people at the medical center feel the same way. And on behalf of the medical center and on behalf of her good friend Sarah, who nicely came tonight, we just want to say thank you and present you with a small token of our appreciation. Some flowers, which is appropriate because she is a gardener, and a gift certificate to Gardener Supply, and some chocolate because Valentine's Day is tomorrow. Sharon, thank you.
Let me just say that this week has been, it's a difficult transition. I know all of you that are younger are thinking, oh, well, I'm looking forward to retirement. And you will look forward to it, but it is not an easy transition, as I'm learning. All of you taking this time is making it a lot easier. I think that my head is swelling, but not really, because anyways, I can't say enough about the people that have supported me and are here tonight. And thank you, and I'm not going to eat up any more of your meeting time, so thank you very much.
So who wants to follow that? I know there are people that have things to say on Speak Out. Jean? Yeah.
Yes, I too would like to thank the hospital for hosting us here. This is a wonderful place for people to gather, and the Physicians for a National Health Plan, many doctors who support universal health care so that we can all have access to good health care, is sponsoring student internships for medical students to introduce them, to help them learn what's going on with the drive for universal health care. But what we also need, and since many of you live near the hospital, these students are coming from all over the country, and we're looking for homes to host them in. So if you would like to help out with this movement with the Physicians for a National Health Plan to host a student intern this summer, one of the medical students, or it could be a student in public health.
So what would they do, Jean, if they were interested?
Contact me or look up Physicians for a National Health Plan online.
So you want to give them your contact information, or how do you want to go?
That's
okay.
fine. Yeah,
okay.
Okay.
Thanks. Any questions for Jean? I think a couple people over here had some comments. Yeah.
I just want to let you all know that the City Council had quite a nice ceremony for Sharon. It was very dramatic, and it was pretty impressive. And I also want to share with you the lady next to me worked with Sharon for 48 years here at the hospital and retired as well. So she didn't quite make it to the city. I mean, she was not part of the City Council. She did come down with me to the City Council to honor Sharon, but two amazing women we have here.
I just wanted to give a heads up on a event that's happening on the 24th at 38 South Winooski at the it is the First Congregational Church there right across the street from Rite Aid. So this is what does equity look like, or what equity looks like. It's sponsored by the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance. They keep changing names. And so that event will feature, some of the legislative work that's currently in play, as well as some of the legislators that are putting that work forward. I think Senator Ingram confirmed. I think Representative Chena is on the fence. I think there's also a Progressive Party statewide meeting that same evening or afternoon. It's at 3 p.m. on the 24th at the First Congregational Church. That's 38 South Winooski. So if you could make it out for that, we'll update you on some of the things that are happening. One exciting thing is PR2, the constitutional amendment to remove slavery from the Constitution of the state of Vermont, which we've been working on for about the last 3 years, which is currently, right now as we speak, in Senate GovOps. So show up. We'll give you more information on stuff like that. You can find this information also. It's already posted up on Front Porch Forum.
Any questions? No? So who else? And can I get a show of hands of other people who speak out stuff? We're down to 2. Okay. You? Okay.
Hi, my name is Karen Long. First time we've had a microphone that magnifies our voice. I'll try not to be too loud. Yeah, it is good. So I'm coming tonight. I'm learning more about number 4, and I have a website here that you can look at. This, I'm concerned about this ballot item that we are going to vote on in less than a month, because one, we don't know that much about it,
And I know that Jane Odell and Jean Bergman was our assistant city attorney for 20 years, and they are very, very concerned about it. I totally respect Jean's legal advice, so I think it's something we need to know more about. I think it started with Church Street's looking kind of shabby, so they're talking about privatizing it, I believe, is kind of what I get from it. And I would like people to look on this. Like I say, I'm still learning about it, but I think it's something that is way too soon for us to vote on it because we don't know what could happen. I spoke at the city council meeting saying that, I feel like we need to step back and learn from things people are doing in other communities because we're doing a lot of things that are costing a lot of money and really dividing our city, which I've never seen it like this. I've lived here 42 years. So anyway, I would encourage people to look into this and consider voting no for number 4. I have another person who's more knowledgeable than me on it.
Thanks, Karen. I'm Walter. I introduced myself at the start. I'm unfortunately not in this NPA, but just hoping to spread the word about ballot question number 4. We are part of a kind of upstart group. We're calling ourselves like No on 4, and we're hoping to spread the word about this ballot item because we do feel that it's been introduced too quickly for people to really evaluate what the ramifications are. It effectively changes the management structure of the downtown improvement district, which is right now pretty small. It would expand the downtown improvement district drastically, if I'm not mistaken, down past Pine Street from Church Street and all the way to the waterfront. It also, I think I mentioned it, privatizes management. So it incorporates what's city-owned management into a 501c6. So it really removes a lot of democratic oversight from overall management practices, and that's concerning that we haven't had enough due process about figuring out what actually this ballot measure entails. But I think also I've been working with Betsy McGavis, who's a UVM student and has studied other districts like this in other cities. They've actually raised rents across the whole city, not just nearby the district. And Burlington is actually 60% renters. And so I'm a renter. It's a grave concern of mine that rents will go up because of this, or at least they're likely to. And I think another thing that's really concerning is that the private management can also lead to private security, which behave more like mall cops or mall police than an overseen police force. Excuse me. So they can actually criminalize already vulnerable members of a community, and like in San Francisco, this can lead to a lot of lawsuits and things like that. So we unfortunately forgot our flyers, but in the interest of public education, would encourage you all to go to noon4btv.com. There's an email address there, and we'd love to speak with you. Thank you.
Thanks. And Adam, I know you want to respond, and I imagine other city councilors probably want to speak to this as well. We have, I think, at least one other speak out thing, and then we can go to the city councilor updates, and you can speak to that as well as other things. Does that work for you all? Okay. So Richard, and then you, sir.
Well, I would say that we hope the mayor will be here to speak about ballot items, so I don't want to go over the same ground twice. I just want to say that Maria and the medical center has kindly offered, I won't say any specific, but in the spring, for us to do a tour of the new wing under the auspices of the NPA. Yes. So do you want to?
Could you just grab the mic there, Maria?
Sure.
So that's something to look forward to, and I hope it'll be well attended because it's.
So it'll be at the MPA meeting on Wednesday, May 8th. We'll take a portion of that meeting, probably from 7:15 to 8, and we can all walk over together to the new wing with Dave Kelty, our Director of Facilities Planning and Development, and have a tour.
Great.
Yeah, I'm Michael Long. I just wanted to say a word about the provision in the zoning ordinance known as the no more than 4 unrelated. I wasn't able to be here last month, but I saw the tape, and that question or this ordinance provision generated some lively discussion here. So this evening, the DRB did deliberate on a case which the Code Enforcement Office brought for a property on Weston Street, and they did uphold the notice of violation, which is what the Code Office was hoping for and what I was hoping for, and other people as well. So I just want to note that the discussion last month suggested to me that there's a fair amount of confusion about the intent and the effect of this provision of the ordinance. There's nothing either in intent or effect that's discriminatory in it. It's really about restraining landlords who exploit properties and tenants and neighborhoods as well. And in fact, when this provision came into the ordinance around 2000, it actually liberalized the rules regarding how many people could live, unrelated people could live in an apartment, because prior to that, there was a group quarters prohibition that would have not allowed even for unrelated people. So this provision liberalized it in the sense that it allowed for unrelated people, but not more than for. So at any rate, I just wanted to make that announcement and try to help with clarifying that. Thank you.
And I just want to say, as one of the 5 members of the DRB who just voted to uphold that violation, I do still think that the ordinance needs to be changed to be more liberalized and not confused about what it currently says. And I do think it could be expanded to be more inclusive.
And what do you mean by liberalized?
So I think that the standard that it needs to be 2,500 square feet in order to have 5 unrelated adults is too high. I think that needs to be reduced, first of all. Second of all, I think that it's too easy to deny people it's too easy to deny the application to be a functional family in terms of it saying that you have to have the DRB has often denied, I think, functional family in the early days of this ordinance coming through in cases where I think it should be approved. And I think changing the ordinance in ways that makes it easier to apply for this functional family, or makes it not necessary to apply for it, but rather to have it an enforcement case if something else happens that you're against. In terms of other parts of the ordinance, I think that would be much more liberal and inclusive.
Any questions? Yeah.
One question. Again, Mark Hughes, just because of the nature, the format of this particular setting right here, this is really more of a speak out. I think this topic is extremely rich, and there's a lot of detail that goes into it. We had a full discussion last time. I would recommend that this would go on an agenda for a full discussion, for the benefit of those who were not involved in the discussion last month, as well as those of us who are just scratching their heads right now.
Would people like that to look at that in more depth at the next meeting? I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads. Yep.
I'd just like to start up a microphone in front of me, but I've got a loud voice, so we're good. We were meant to have a discussion about this last month, and I'm assuming the person that wasn't there last month is now here. It disappointed me greatly to see that we didn't actually come to a resolution. We come to a resolution last month, even with you absent. I think the general tone and the general feelings of the meeting we were relatively against the ordinance, and I don't think our opinion really got highlighted at that point because you weren't there, and I feel it was relatively insulting to us to bring this up and then not actually be present for that.
So what I'd like to suggest is that we put this conversation on hold till we have a chance to be prepared for it, and in the next meeting or two we'll have a full and rich conversation, because it's people feel strongly about it, and it'd be nice to have everybody be appropriately represented. Does that work? Okay. So I'm going to suggest now.
Can
What's
we
up?
make sure that the person who was meant to bring it up will be here for the next meeting? Because, as I said, he wasn't last meeting when he was meant
And
to.
who are you speaking of?
I'm assuming the gentleman.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll work with you, Michael, okay? And others, the DRB, and a number of others too.
That I have to come next month.
It is now mandatory.
Yes, it's not optional. No, we'll try to make sure that the key voices are represented. But I'd like to move on to the city council update. The counselors have agreed that they just go down the line here. So, Adam, I'm going to give you the regular microphone. So that way I can jump in and cut you off when you get long-winded. Yeah.
I've never been long-winded in this forum, have I? Come on. I will do my best to be short-winded, and I'm going to touch on items related to two committees that I serve on. First, the Public Safety Committee, of which I chair. We have been looking at, we've been looking at two really important items over the last. You'd like me to stand? The people at home, I can stand. Now I'm going to get long-winded. People at home are admiring my bald spot. That's coming in more and more each day. The Public Safety Committee has been looking at an encampment removal policy for the last few months that I've promised to have in place, or refer to the full council in time for the warm months is when we see more folks in encampments. The policy is looking at under what circumstances, and the circumstances will be limited, the city can come in or would come in and remove encampments. And so we'll be another hearing on this. There have been several, I think 3. We're trying to have up to 5 on this important issue. So contact me if you'd like to. The next public safety meeting is not scheduled yet, but when it is, I will be sure to send it out publicly. We've also, last meeting, we looked at an issue around the police commission's role in oversight of instances where citizens make complaints about police officers here in town. We've asked, this goes back to 2017, by resolution, we asked the Public Safety Committee, of which I was a member but not chair at the time, to work with the police commission in improving the system that has them be involved in reviewing instances of complaints. And the police commission has now come back twice to the committee where we've given them direction and some advice on how they can improve that policy. And at the next meeting, which I anticipate to be in March, early March, by the second week of March, we're going to be considering that important policy. So contact me if you want more on that. 2 quick things on CDNR, which means Community Development and Neighborhood Revitalization. We like to abbreviate things at City Hall. ELI, Early Learning Initiative, which is a grant funding program for at-need or below 65% area median income, affordability metric, providing grants for those families to get their 0 to 3 kiddos into good early education programs. That program is coming along nicely, and our first grantees the grant will be open in March 1, so it's coming up. Spread the word that if you'd like to apply for that, go to the city website. Quick final thing on CDNR related items. We heard an advance findings on the city's most recent equity report. A lot of fascinating things in this report, data points that we have not been considering that will lead to policy directions that the city are being looked at more so than ever. Please go to the city website, to the CDNR website, to look at that report, or reach out to me and I can send it off to you directly. The final thing, which is on the DID, I'm not going to get into debate on opinions. I'll just share another website that is more neutral and factual. burlingtonvt.gov/2019/DID. That's just neutral information that you can read and make your own judgment on how to vote on that further. And Moreau I'm sure we'll kick this around more if he gets here. burlingtonvt.gov/2019 is information on all of the charter related questions. So with that, I will stop.
I guess I will.
Yes.
Hi, good evening. So I serve on the Ordinance Committee, and I also serve on the Board of Finance. And really, most of what I want to speak to is the Board of Finance. And so my presentation or update will be brief because the mayor is coming. We spent a lot of time on the DID. And Councilor Roof, or Adam, really did a tremendous amount of work on this and brought it forward. And there was a lot of discussion. There was one public hearing at the at the fire station, and yes,
Used to be a fire station.
yes, yeah. Anyways, and the residents weighed in and said they were really not well enough informed and had a lot of concerns. Those concerns were heard, but I feel like, and some things changed to try to make it more responsive to some of the concerns that were raised. But at this juncture, I was one of the counselors who did not feel it was ready to move forward to the ballot, and I just feel like you all should know that. I feel that that a lot of improvement, I support the concept, but what I really I didn't have a compare and contrast between looking at the current structure of the Church Street Marketplace versus this new nonprofit structure. And I really would have benefited from seeing those two and seeing the pros and cons and then making a decision. And so I felt we would have benefited from having a little more time to do that. And then some of the concerns regarding rents, you've heard some of the other issues. Certainly, I needed more time to figure out if we had protected residents enough. But I'll stop there on that item. The rest of the time on the Board of Finance was really focused on looking at whether or not there would be a significant gap between revenue and expenses and whether we would need to come forward and ask for a small tax increase. And there was a lot of debate and a lot of pressure put on the administration to potentially not do it, and we did have a pros and cons on that. We had some money that we could use, but once again, it was one-time money, and so next year would be either cutting those programs or once again asking for a larger tax increase. And so ultimately, I supported it, but I'm hoping that we won't have to call it up. You know, just because if indeed you support it as residents and voters, if you indeed support it, it doesn't mean that the city has to call up that total amount. And so I'm hoping that as we move forward, because you know, the budget doesn't end until June 30th. There may be some additional revenue that we weren't expecting, or there may be reduction in expenses. And so I'm just hopeful. Once again, you know, we're trying to be very sensitive to the fact that all of you were so generous in supporting the bond issues that happened in November, and trying to look at, you know, the schools have needs, the city has needs, and I'm a resident too, and I look at, can I afford this? And I worry about that. I really, really worry about that. You know, and that doesn't mean that the need isn't real, but can we afford it? And so I'll stop there, and I'm hoping the mayor will be here so that he can go further in this conversation. Thank you.
Great. And if the mayor is not able to make it, maybe we can reopen this conversation if you want to add more.
Thank you, Cindy. I have two things I'd like to address tonight, and I feel like I'm not quite sure where to turn here, but
Oh, you have to stand up.
I have to stand up, but I have things I need to read here, so I'm not quite sure how to logistically do this. So first I'd like to report that we had last week our second annual Burlington Wild Way Summit. And I know that some folks who have been here before have heard a little bit about this, but it's an organization that's focused on conserving and connecting the incredible wealth of natural and wild lands that we have in Burlington. So we, as a city, enjoy almost 50% of our lands are either open and natural lands, and 25% of those are in urban wild, essentially undeveloped floodplains and so forth. Think of the Intervale. So I have some great progress to report. That we had, I'd say, almost 50 people there, people who had been there before, but new people as well, to talk about. These are naturalists, people who are stakeholders and own these lands and manage these lands, including the University of Vermont, the Parks and Rec, arms force, which is controlled by Rock Point, and Parks and Rec. So it was a great conversation. It was really a fantastic, uplifting day. But what I really want to report is some real progress on this. We have a website. So I have that right here. So if people would like to check out the website, we're getting started. It's called, I'll give you the URL. It's https burlingtonwildways.org. So that's very simple to remember. What's on there now are trails around Burlington. So if you want to get out and enjoy the wilds in Burlington, you can see trail maps. And this will be a central link that anyone who wants to get out in the Burlington community and wants to get out in the wild, you can do that. There are other information on here, and it will be richer as we get go forward in the year. We're gotten to the point where we have swag. So we have a little hat here. We have some stickers that I've shared. And the most kind of exciting thing is that we're going to roll out our first signed trail, which will be starting at Salmon Hole. I think people who know where Salmon Hole is, runs all the way down the Winooski River, connects down into the Intervale, and goes all the way over to the Ethan Allen Homestead. So these are all existing trails, but now they'll be consistently signed. There'll be information along them. So if people want to know more about the history, the ecology, and so forth of all of these lands that you're walking through, that's going to be available. We're hoping to have that around the city in years ahead, as well as talking about expanding this initiative to our adjacent communities, Winooski, Colchester, South Burlington, that this could actually be a connected wildways trail all around those communities as well. So great potential. It's really going very, very well. We've got some solid funding behind us. Zoe Richards, who's our director, actually is being paid for her work now, so we really have some capacity that we didn't have before.
And the URL is burlingtonwildways.org?
burlingtonwildways.org. And then I wonder, this is a little more serious. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So is the signage part of the Winooski Valley Park District signage?
So it is in all of, so the challenge that we face is that these are, all the lands that we're going across with these trails are controlled by many, many different owners. For example, there are 11 different owners alone in the Intervale. So the intent is that as people find their way around the city, they can always use this logo, but it will be combined with all of the other logos of the organizations that control and manage those lands. So we're kind of an umbrella organization all getting together to figure out how to make them all universally accessible. Okay. I think there's something that not everybody perhaps was paying attention or was able to watch on Channel 17, the City Council meeting. There was a resolution that came before us, which I had the privilege to work on, which recognizes something that is not an event that was really kind of reprehensible, which was posting of anti-gay, anti-Semitic, and racist sentiments at 3 places around our city. And I wonder if I could just read that resolution. It's very quick, but I think it's really important to saying something about us as a community. Whereas the city of Burlington is an inclusive community welcoming residents and visitors of all races, religions, genders, abilities, sexual orientations, and sexual identities. And whereas the United States and Vermont constitutions and federal, state, and local laws and ordinances protect the rights of Burlington residents and visitors. And whereas on the night of Monday, February 4th, 2019, posters, banners, and stickers communicating loathsome, hate-filled attack messages were deliberately posted within view at Burlington organizations, including the Havi Zedek Synagogue, Outright Vermont, and the Pride Center of Vermont. And whereas the posters and banners listed the name of a group called the Patriot Front, identified by the Southern Poverty Law Center as a white supremacist group as the organization responsible. And whereas a hate-inspired attack against the dignity and rights of any Burlington resident or visitor is an attack against all Burlington residents and visitors. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Burlington City Council fully and emphatically repudiates and condemns the individuals and organizations that on the night of February 4th, 2019, posted banners and posters expressing hateful anti-LGBTQIA, anti-Semitic, and racist sentiments, and be it further resolved that the Burlington City Council repudiates and condemns all speech, acts, and verbal assaults that include messages of hate against any member of our Burlington community. That was a really important message for us, and I think we all have to take that to heart. We are a community, and that this type of display of that type of message is not something that's acceptable within our dialogue within this community. So, a little serious, but something that's important. I hope that, that people, if you have any questions or would like a copy of the resolution, it's right here.
Does anybody have questions or comments?
I just say that the last time we met in this room a month ago, the day before that, these same posters were being posted on Riverside, maybe about 45 seconds from my house. I'm glad that there was some action that was taken on it, and I think that, again, I think we can do better. It sounds like this just happened about a week ago, is what you're talking about. I know Brandon's been informed of it, and so there's sometimes things have to rise to a certain level to get folks' attention. So I just wanted to, bring it out that there's those of us who've brought this thing forward a little bit ago. But I really want to ask a question to Adam, though. Where's this equity report? Is this a new report? Is this the same report that came from Curtis back a couple years ago?
You could have.
For the oversight and professional regulation, if somebody wants to get involved in that before the report's out.
Yeah, I can.
So we're not arguing over it once it hits.
Yeah, so it's all publicly available on Board Docs, which is our document management system, which I admit is not the easiest to navigate always. I have some issues with that myself, but it is on the Public Safety Committee meeting from 2 weeks ago, the oversight piece, and the equity report is posted on the CD&R meeting from last week.
Is that a recent report?
Yes, yep, and it was a preview of the report, so the report's not published yet, and I do not believe that it is a second iteration of that one from a few years ago that Curtis did, but it is building on top of that mission, sort of thing. Okay.
Okay, other questions or comments on this? Okay, so I'm going to suggest that we move on to the conversation between the two candidates for the East District for City Council. And so Richard and Jack, if you'd come up here. The agenda calls it a debate. I'm hoping it's more of a conversation. And here's how I'm suggesting that we go, which is that each candidate will give an opening statement for roughly 3 minutes. I'll be a timekeeper just to try to make sure that things are fair, that somebody doesn't have too much airtime. Then we'll look to questions from you all, and each candidate will have an opportunity to respond for a minute or so, and then we'll have closing comments of about 2 minutes each. And just for background, my understanding that the East District is a combination of wards 1 and 8, right, for the City Council. So we have city councilors for each ward, but then we have these districts that are multi-ward, and that's what these two are. Richard is the incumbent now, and they're both. He's running for re-election. Jack's running for election to represent both wards 1 and wards 8. Is there any other background that you all need before we start?
Oh no, I was wondering if you could give me a sec. I'm just live streaming.
Okay. And if you're live streaming and there are people that have questions from the live stream, we'll try to work with you on that. I wish I had that technology, but I'm too old. So, so we didn't speak to this, but Richard, as incumbent, do you want to start and with opening statement, or?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Well, it's a real privilege to be here tonight and have the opportunity to talk with all of you, my neighbors. And it's been a fantastic almost 2 years now that I've had the opportunity to get involved with city government and with my neighbors in understanding the issues and working on the issues. And I think just to step back a little bit, I've been part of this community and in Burlington my whole life. I came here at the age of 2. I grew up on Brooks Avenue. I went to Taft School and the junior high school, Edmonds Junior High School, BHS, and then left for a time to get my education, but came back 20 years ago, a little over 20 years now ago with my family, my young family then. Actually, we had no family. We had 2 boys. Lived on Tebow Parkway, so right here, and then actually went back to Brooks Avenue when my mom retired and went to a retirement community. So I'm actually living in the house that I grew up in. And so I think the opportunities that I've had to serve you as city council have really been it's been an opportunity for me to take my lived experience in the neighborhood, and not as a politician. I'm a dad, I'm a local businessman, I'm an architect, that knows this community. And it's been my opportunity and real privilege to understand these issues and see what I can do about them on a municipal level, right here in our city. I think that the challenges that face us are affordability, how to build housing and make our economy something that supports everybody who wants to be part of the city. What's important to me is that we give young families, young professionals, seniors who want to age in place the opportunity to stay in Burlington. And so affordability is one of the things that we have to address. We face an issue of serious climate change. This is a worldwide issue, but we need to figure out what to do about that, what action we can take on a local level. And I'll say a little bit more about that later, I think, if that comes up. But certainly the Burlington Wildways is something that I feel is, if we can treasure those and conserve those resources that are available to us, that is making change on a local level. Finally, I think that this issue of how to make Burlington a place that people want to move to. It's been my privilege to be a strong advocate for renewing our schools, and I think that it was my voice that was critical, my voice was one of the critical voices that got the bond vote on the November ballot, where it was supported for the $70 million renewal and re-envisioning of the high school. It was my vote and my voice that got that there, such that there was a supermajority vote in November, and we will be seeing that school renewed, and it will be part of those features that bring new families and provide life to our city.
Right at 0 there.
Perfect.
Great. Jack.
Great, thanks. So my name's Jack Hanson. I moved to Burlington to go to UVM, as many do, and was lucky enough to be able to stick around after that and really, become a part of this community and get really involved in the community and learn a lot from those around me. I think my priorities, and I work at Green Mountain Power, the electric utility, and work on reducing fossil fuel use for some of their biggest energy using customers. So that's just a little bit about me. In terms of my priorities and what I would really want to focus on, there's a decent amount of overlap there for sure with some of the issues that Richard had touched on. And the 2 biggest pillars and issues that I've been talking to hundreds of people about around the district, including a lot of people in this room that I recognize from visiting you at your door, are affordability and climate change, which Richard highlighted both of those. And I think I have a lot of ideas about how to address them, and I've learned a lot from talking to you all about how we can address them. I think in terms of affordability, and I'm sure we'll get into this, I think it's really important that we are holding UVM accountable and really looking at UVM's role in the housing market in Burlington. I think we need to pressure and work with UVM not only to house a greater percentage of students, but also looking at the rates that UVM is charging students to live in a small shared dorm room. It basically breaks out to over $1,000 a month to share that dorm room, and that really drastically impacts our housing market and forces students who have the option to move downtown and accept conditions that they otherwise might not if they had an affordable on-campus option. So that's something I've been talking a lot with folks about. Also been talking a lot about landlord accountability as well, and I think this is especially a problem in our district with certain landlords that do not, upkeep their properties and do not really provide that much respect for tenants. And I've experienced that firsthand year after year living as a renter in the ward, and a lot of the folks I talk to are experiencing that as well. So that's a huge one. And then climate change is what I've really devoted. I studied environmental studies at UVM and have really devoted my life to over the past 7 or 8 years, and continue to do that. And as Richard said, I hope we can get into that one and some of the solutions there, because I'm running out of time. Thanks.
Okay, so thank you. So what we're going to do now is have you all ask questions, and each person will have a minute to speak. And actually, what I'm going to do is set you up with this so you can start this, so I can work the crowd. So when one of you starts, you hit the start button, and you'll know when the minute is up. Does that work?
So I win.
Yeah.
Since you obviously have very similar values, could you each of you tell us how you think you will be able to represent us better than the other person? Or why?
Well, I think one of the most fundamental things that I've tried to do on the campaign that I would want to continue to do is really robust engagement with the community. And that's why our campaign has knocked on every single door in the community other than locked buildings, and really tried to have that two-way dialogue, that two-way conversation, to really learn from people, learn their ideas, and incorporate those into better, stronger, and more thoughtful policy. I think the earlier on that we engage people in the process, the better, the more diversity of voices that we get in, the better outcomes we get at the end. And I think we've seen over the past several years in Burlington many issues where you have a lot of people coming into the process late in the game and towards the end who didn't feel included up until that point. And then you get these conflicts, and you get these situations where you have controversial decisions trying to be kind of pushed through or changed at the last minute. So I think an early on robust community engagement is critical.
So I think your question is right on. We do share similar values, both Jack and myself. I think that I've already highlighted the clear difference between us, which is experience actually living in this neighborhood. I know Jack has been here for a few years. It really has been my lifetime here, living in this community and in this city. I think what I bring is not only a lifetime of living here, but also the experience of being someone who runs a business in Burlington. I'm an architect, and the firm that I work with, I'm one of the principals there. So I understand, I think, some of the challenges that we face as a city in terms of what do we need to do to attract people. What do we have to do to make sure that once we've attracted people, we can actually give them a place to live? So those issues are and those challenges are what I live every day as someone who's trying to run a business in Burlington. That was very quick. I had other things to say, but I'll leave it right there.
Let's see. So who else has got? Yes, can you grab the microphone there?
So I go first this time.
So I think one of the big things we often talk about in citywide things is affordability. So I'd just like to hear what you would like to do if you were to get it again or get it in terms of affordability, and then also how you would plan to pay for that. Like, how does that impact other people who are living in Ward 1 and Ward 8?
Thanks for that question. So affordability. I think we're already starting to move the needle, and we're going in the right direction. You think about the fact that we have construction going on on what will eventually be about 740 units of housing out in the new North End. I mean, well, it's between the old and new North End. We're going to see, and I'm confident that we will be seeing, construction of new housing with the completion of the City Place project. So that's another 270 units of housing. And I think we have seen with the Eagles Landing project that was just completed that when those units come available, the cost that we've seen some price pressure on those landlords out there in the communities. They've had to either do a better job of making their apartments, more attractive, or they've had to lower the rent. So we're going in the right direction. We're currently making the planning and zoning. I didn't do that, but maybe I'll just 2 seconds. So better zoning. That's more, easier to navigate is something that we're working on right now. And I think we need to just keep pushing forward with the initiatives that we have and getting more support for the Housing Trust Fund that will then do the really affordable housing out there in the community.
Well, I used up a lot of my intro on the UVM piece of it, and I do think that's a huge market driver that we need to look at and focus on. But I think another one that I've really been talking to a lot of folks about at the door has to do with the cost of utilities. We have a lot of renters that are facing, heating bills of over $200 a month. This is a result of properties that have been very neglected, and I think we can all see that walking around the neighborhood, and many of us live the impacts of that. So I think what we need to look at is what other communities have done, specifically looking at what Boulder, Colorado has done, which is they basically set up basic efficiency standards across the community. And for property owners that didn't meet those basic efficiency standards, the landlord would then have to take on the burden of the heating costs each month. That was a huge incentive, and it really changed and shifted the incentive. And I think that's what we need to look at doing here. I'm out of time. I wish I could talk about it more, but that's one idea that could really help.
Okay, so I'm going to do a quick check. We have about 15 minutes for questions before people wrap up with closing statements. How many people have questions or think you have questions at this point? So Carter, Jean. Okay, so it seems like we're in good shape.
Yeah, so I was just going to ask, obviously, like, corporate money is a big influence over our politics from the federal all the way down to the local level, and it's an issue I'm pretty passionate about. So I'm just wondering if both of you have committed, or if you would commit to not taking any corporate money in your campaigns, and if you have already, kind of committing to not going forward and returning those contributions.
Yeah, this is a huge problem in our democracy, and it's one of the reasons that I am running as a progressive and find myself aligning with the Progressive Party, is this fundamental issue of the influence of big money in politics. And one of the tenets of the Progressive Party is to not accept any corporate campaign contributions, and I'm absolutely committed to that. And I think it's really important it's very hard, but it's very important to do the groundwork of working to get small contributions from actual people who support you, and that way you're accountable to those people rather than being accountable to a business or a corporation.
So, Carter, I'd just like to unpack what corporate money means, because I think you're implying that any business owner in Burlington who chooses to give either one of these campaigns, that's somehow corporate money. I think is that true? Is that what you're saying?
I come from a family of two small business owners, so I definitely understand the argument that's often brought up about, small businesses versus large, like Walmart or something.
And that's the point I want to make, is that
I would just say, though, and I would actually like you to respond to this, would be it not only impacts us in our politics, but it also gives, if it's like a one-owner LLC, it allows that individual business owner to double their max contribution. So it allows them to donate as a corporation, but also allows them to donate as an individual. Mm-hmm. So they have more of a voice potentially than just individual community members, and that's why I think it's really, really important that we're doing that. But I'll let you respond. My bad.
Okay, I guess I'll have to just add a little bit. So with that a little bit of extra definition, I think a majority of my campaign donations are, small donations, and they also come from, people who are incredibly important people in the business community as well. So you think about people like Ski Rack or Outdoor Gear Exchange or Speeder and Earls. They're just all of these small. That's the real incredible wealth that we have as a community of these small businesses and committed owners who love Burlington and they make Burlington what it is. So those are just as much citizens as anybody else. And so those are people who I feel are valued members of this community, and I value the fact that they support my campaign, that they see me as someone who can really improve at the conditions of Burlington and for business in Burlington, because that's really at the base of our economy. That's what a vibrant economy is about, is that it's these people who want to invest in Burlington, they want to make business here, they want to provide a living for and employment for people. They have the opportunity to do that. They are really the soul of our community. I wouldn't vilify them.
Turn it off. So, Jean, I think you had a question.
Yes, I'd like to go back to the issue of housing, and I'd like to see an increase in home ownership and less rental in the city, and a prevention of homelessness. Oftentimes, homelessness comes about because landlords have been able to evict people too easily. Can we prevent people from being evicted from their rental housing, and how can we encourage people to become homeowners? I'm very pleased that we are constructing, 720, 740 new units, and I think that's what we need to do so that there's more permanent housing and not temporary shelter.
Right. So let's start with the first part, which is, how do we encourage home ownership in Burlington, which is, something that the CDNR committee and the neighborhood project has talked about quite a bit, an initiative that I've been following, and I'd like to be, hope to have the opportunity to continue to follow and work with. The thought is that as our community, we build more housing, that the neighborhoods that we inhabit, which are single-family homes that many have been converted into multi-unit, that we would be able to, through the Housing Trust Fund and through a neighborhood stabilization fund, be able to convert those houses back to either single-family ownership or taking them and making them into duplexes or triplexes that would be affordable for young professionals or young families that are coming to the neighborhood. So I think there are those kind of initiatives that are available to us with that. In terms of homelessness, I know that Burlington is, and I haven't heard this issue before about people being evicted and ending up homeless. I know that Burlington is one of the places where we really understand the challenges that our vulnerable communities face, and we support them. And I'm absolutely behind those initiatives to help people from homelessness back to being in housing.
Yeah, I think part of what we need to do is what Richard said, which is ensure that we're preserving houses as houses, or in some cases converting them back into houses. But I think the bigger obstacle to home ownership is the economics of it in Burlington, and the price of buying a home is really out of reach for a lot of people who are getting to an age of wanting to buy a home. And the job opportunities and wages that would be able to support that are hard to come by. And if we're not going to end up talking about climate, I'll tie it back to climate. I think by addressing climate change aggressively as a community, we can create a lot of those good jobs. And I'm the direct product of that. That's part of what's been able to keep me around in Burlington is to be able to work in Vermont on this clean energy transition. So as much as we can bring that back home, we can see a lot more folks getting these well-paying jobs that it's going to take to really settle down here and be able to afford it. In terms of homelessness, I only have 14 seconds, but it's critical. I think part of it in terms of the eviction has to do with obviously the cost of housing and landlord accountability, which are both critical, but also looking at providing housing for people who already are chronically homeless. And I had the opportunity to learn a lot from Champlain Housing Trust on some really amazing initiatives that they're doing there that I don't have time to talk about, but I think we should be supporting those efforts.
Okay, so we have another question here. Any other questions? Just okay. Cyril? Okay, so we have 3 questions. So if we're going to try to be succinct both in the questions and the answers. That'd be great.
I lived in Burlington for more than 40 years, and I don't think the politics or the political climate has ever been as divisive as it has been in recent years. We've seen numerous controversial issues, the most recent one being the decision not to put the question about City Hall Park on the ballot, but others going back, Burlington Telecom and changing the zoning to do the City Place project and so forth. And all those decisions were exceptionally divisive, and they involved people speaking out very passionately and forcefully. And again, I saw the council go in a different direction. And the most insidious thing about that divisiveness is that the administration often explained that away by saying, "Oh, those were just that's just a vocal minority." You know, those people don't really, their views don't count especially. They're just making a lot of noise. I don't think that's a healthy way to engage in a debate or a discussion. So I guess I'd like the candidates just to perhaps address that divisiveness. Perhaps we might want to, with reference to the most recent vote on City Hall Park, that might be useful. Thank you.
And in a minute.
Yeah, so the City Hall Park issue, you know, I've talked to plenty of people who in the community who really oppose that plan, and I've talked to folks who support it as well. But what I do think is critical, whether you support or oppose it, is allowing the community to have that say and be able to understand where the community as a whole feels about this issue. And one of the most effective and best ways to do that is to allow for a vote on the March 5th ballot. And I was definitely disappointed that, you know, that opportunity isn't going to be there. At the very least, as a tool to understand where the public's at on this issue. So I think that would have been a critical opportunity, and it's one that we missed because it was voted down by the City Council. So that was disappointing to me. And I think, yeah, we've seen other issues as well where you had a lot of folks trying really hard to break through and you know, speak out and have their voices heard, and were essentially ignored in many cases.
So before I address City Hall Park, I think I would note that the city has been going through in the past 5 or 6 years some significant changes, significant improvements and movement toward affordable housing, you know, more housing. So these are all changes hard, and people get upset about it. So that, I think that is part of the environment that we've been facing. Is these are difficult initiatives. We've had to wrestle with them, and we've moved them forward, to me, in the correct direction. The City Hall Park, obviously, vote is something I had to vote on, and it was a hard decision for me. The difficulty, obviously, was that I do believe that there were 2 democratic processes that happened, both the proposal to put a ballot initiative on, but also there had been over 6 years, and more than that, of public input and process that had gotten us to the point that we had a park that we could vote on. And I think that, you know, for me, I would have been able to support putting it on the ballot if the language had been more fair, if it had been balanced and neutral and had 1 question rather than 2. All we had to do was do that, and I am quite sure that we would have had a unanimous vote to put this on. So, you know, I think what we need to do in the future is for those, because I think the advisory ballots, advisory questions should be allowed to be on the ballots, we have to provide direction for people who want to do that, for those citizens group that want to do that, you know, here's how the language, these are the parameters that the language has to fit in. It has to be fair and neutral, and therefore, when those advisory ballots come to us, then we can support them.
Cyril.
I'd also like to put forward some hot button issues in the possible desire to see you differentiate yourself as candidates. What I propose is to just list 3 that are important to me and just have you pick one that speaks to you.
Okay.
So the F-35 is certainly controversial, and I realize that there's limited aspect that you have in that realm. But anyway, it certainly came before the council at one point in terms of presenting it to as a ballot item. This is Burlington Telecom and the desire for significant local ownership, especially in the form of the co-op, and that may still be present depending upon what the PUC decides coming up. And then an easier one maybe is the transportation infrastructure, especially in relation to bike ped. You're probably aware last night there was a city presentation at Contoy relating to the electric bike and scooter possibility. And so any of those issues that speak to you, I'd be happy to hear about.
Well, maybe I'll take on BED or Burlington Telecom. I think we have to keep in mind that was the city was in an incredibly difficult position. We were $17 million of funds, general funds, that had been misallocated and taken. There was the potential that Citibank would rip all of the fiber out of the ground. We really were in danger of losing that. And it's a real success story when you think about the fact that Burlington Telecom turned around in the years that we were able to, that the administration was able to negotiate the time to do that. And then it was purchased. It hasn't quite been purchased yet, but that we found it was really a commercial venture that was going, and we were able to find a way to actually keep those resources in our community. We found a really great partner to work with us, and it would have been. I absolutely was, intrigued by a local ownership, but if you looked at the business basics that underwrote that proposal, they just didn't stand up. And the BTAB, who exhaustively investigated this issue, said that this was not really, it was brought forward, but it really wasn't on the same par as the other proposals that we saw from commercial ventures. I wish I had more time.
So with Burlington Telecom, I did support the local option throughout the process. And I think, if there were issues where it wasn't quite at a place that we were comfortable with it, I think the focus should have been on collaborating with and making it possible to find a way to keep our telecom locally owned. I think that's really critical, and it deserved greater investment and greater creativity around how we could make that possible and make that happen. The F-35, I'm unequivocally opposed to the basing of the F-35 and always have been, and I think it's shameful that this is going to be happening. But in terms of my last 30 seconds, I'll talk about the bike pedestrian. I'm someone who gets around Burlington on foot and via public transit and on bike, and it's really critical that we do better in terms of providing infrastructure for people to get around who don't own a car for whatever reason. And I think we've made a lot of progress, certainly, and can really build upon that progress so that folks can get around safely on the sidewalks and in the bike lanes. So I wish I had more time there as well, but it's absolutely a priority.
That's pretty good.
I think this will be our last question because we've got some other stuff to get to. I can't quite vault over it. Thank you, Carter.
Hi, my question is that wards 1 and 8 are pretty disparate in terms of who we are, but maybe we're not. And I think we have a tendency to see each other as having very different priorities and life experiences and age. I'm wondering if you all have noticed in your time talking with your neighbors from both of these wards, what do we have in common? What can you help foster among us as a region, as a district, that helps us better recognize our similarities and points of advocacy that we can share?
I've lost track.
I went first last time, so you were.
Oh, yeah, that's right, that's right. Well, that's been one of the funnest parts about this campaign is really bringing a lot of different people together around the community. And obviously we have a lot of students in our district and also a lot of long-term residents, and bridging those divides and those gaps and finding that common ground has been really exciting and really fun, and to open up those conversations. And I think some of the issues that we've been talking about, like climate change and affordability, resonate across those populations for sure. And I think one of the pieces that is important to hit, that I have found that really has resonated across that, is landlord accountability. And just to be clear, there are some great landlords in Burlington who really do work really hard and live in the community. And I've had Andy Hard was one great landlord that I did have. Other than him, though, I've had some horrible ones, and I think we all know that there are some really negligent landlords who don't live in the community and who don't maintain the properties and who don't respond to tenant concerns. And this is something that affects all of us, including homeowners, because it's such a dominant force in our community. So that would be one example, I think, of something that bridges those gaps and that people feel.
So I think that, I'm thinking to a specific evening when I was sitting in Ward 8 and talking with 5 or 6 folks who live there. These are, people who are single-family homeowners. And the issues that they face in terms of what they feel as, threats to the neighborhood, and that they are being overwhelmed by students is really a matter of degree, because we see that in Ward 1 as well. So I think that the issue, although it's really a matter of degree, the solutions are still what we, are the same. In other words, we need to figure out how to make it possible to stabilize our neighborhoods for single family owners and young professionals, and also then in terms of livability within our neighborhoods, how to make our student neighbors more responsible. The university has to be part of that. We need to have the university provide more housing on campus. That should be incumbent upon them. These are all things that face us together as Ward 1 and Ward 8. I think Jack's notion of about climate change, I agree completely. That's something that we face together, and the solution is us working together.
Did you already speak? I'm sorry, I've been busy.
I did.
Okay.
I did.
So I think we're ready for a wrap up. Let me just check. Are we set with questions from the group? Is it brief, Carter?
Very brief.
Okay.
Just in terms of climate change, I was just wondering if you both support moving to 100% renewable energy, not only in electricity, which we're already at, but also heating and transportation over the next 5 to 10 years.
I think that's me.
Is it you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I absolutely support moving forward toward zero net energy buildings and a transportation system that's based on renewable energy as soon as we can get there. I think the sooner that we encourage that in the transportation sector, electric cars and a fleet of electric buses, to me, would be emblematic of our commitment to a future that does not depend on fossil fuels. I think there's some great initiatives out there. We're talking about doing a district energy system that relies on waste heat from the electric plant that's down in the Intervale. That's something that we can really make that's a huge measure that really we can support and differentiate ourselves and move toward that goal of making ourselves a zero net energy city as soon as we can get there. 2030 would be great. Let's see if we can get there sooner.
Yep, I absolutely agree and support that. And Burlington Electric Department right now is working on a plan to get us to 100% to net zero energy, 100% renewable by 2030. And they're working right now with an economic consulting firm who is going to give a report back, I think this summer at the latest, giving us 5 different avenues to achieving that goal, which is an amazing opportunity. And we should open that up to a public process where we can, as a community, choose one of these 5 pathways and approve upon it and go. And it's going to take, it's going to take district heating. It's going to take incentivizing electric vehicles, incentivizing alternative transportation. The weatherization initiative that I mentioned is going to be absolutely critical, and a number of other areas as well. So to me, that's one of the most exciting opportunities about being able to serve on the city council would be to do everything we can to address climate change and really be a model for other cities.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to do closing statements. So Richard, if you'd start.
Well, I did. That's actually up to Jack because I went first on the opening statement.
However you want to go. Your
Sure.
turn?
You go ahead.
I'll start. Yeah. It's 2 minutes. Okay. Yeah. So I've really enjoyed this process, and this is really refreshing to me, being able to run in this race with Richard, and really appreciate the level of respect and mutual respect and courtesy of this campaign, and just getting the opportunity to go around and just meet so many of my neighbors and get to have these conversations about how do we improve our community and move forward and move together. And there's a lot of challenges, and there's a lot of exciting opportunities in addressing those challenges. And, I'm excited for the opportunity to really put in the work that it's going to take to do that. And I'm excited to do that with, alongside of you all and these connections we've built and these conversations that we've developed. It's going to take all of us working together, and that's why I think it's so critical that we're having this robust public engagement on it, because that's the only way we're going to address something like climate change and affordability, is when people are actively involved, not just, putting someone in there who shares your values, but supporting them and doing the work. So, no matter which one of us gets elected, I hope that everyone stays really engaged and helps drive these issues forward. I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Well, Jack, I think this is our first opportunity to really have an opportunity to talk together, as well as with the people who will be making a selection. And I do agree that it's fantastic to have this opportunity and to do it civilly and address the issues. I would say that, again, I'll go back to what I said before. The opportunity to work with you and work for you as your East District City Councilor over the past 2 years has been a great privilege to me. I think I've engaged with using my experience the lived experience in this city, as well as my ability as an architect and a linear thinker to work constructively on specific issues that affect us. So issues around the inclusionary zoning ordinance, which I've been working on, issues about the downtown, the new form-based code downtown, which incorporates a requirement that we have energy efficient buildings, LEED gold buildings in our downtown. That was something that I was instrumental in working on. And I would say, specifically the Burlington Wildways Initiative, which is something that as a really important thing, a recognition of where we are and the opportunities that are before us to do small things, but important things that affect climate change. So I think the experience that I bring, the kind of mindset that I have as a professional and a designer and someone who runs a business is something that I can use, and I have used in the 2 years that I've been part of the council, to identify issues that are important, understand what the steps are to make progress on those, and then actually work together collaboratively with other folks and people on the council and people within the community to move those issues forward. So I would welcome the opportunity to have another 2 years to move those issues forward together with you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you.
And I'm going to ask Kathy and Keith if you're comfortable coming up. Keith, would you as well? So just in the interest of time, there are school commissioners. Kathy's going to speak to her re-election. She's running unopposed but she's going to take this opportunity to speak to some of the issues that she's addressing, and then we're going to go right from there into the discussion about the budget. Is that right? I have that right? Good. And there are handouts being passed around. If maybe here, I can help you with that, Keith, so that you can get settled. Well, okay. So, Kathy, do you want to just speak to your role on the
board?
On the board? Yeah. And I'm going to run these around. So.
Okay. I've been your school board member for the last 2.5 years, and as such, have worked on many issues in the school district, from getting bonds passed to working on the curriculum and the personnel committees, both of which we are moving ahead to, in some ways, try and change or bring more voice into what is going on at the schools and making people more aware and open with the data of what is happening and where we're going with that. So I think one of the biggest things I want to see moved forward on the curriculum committee would be probably really getting this city engaged in the new education of what we call personal learning plans. Because education, we educate our kids as if we were in an agrarian society. And we are standing before what is major changes that have to happen in education. And we seem to have this start, stop, move back, start, stop, and it's not, we need to push forward on it. And I think the community as a whole needs to embrace it and understand what it is. And I think often that is our biggest problem here, is that many people in our community do not understand what we call in jargon PLPs, or personal learning plans, or how grading will change. And there are projects that are going on at Burlington High School at this moment that are wonderful semester called the Burlington City and Lake Semester, which takes kids out of the classroom and gets them into the community to learn about things that they're interested in. And through their interest, they are actually learning more than if they were sitting in a classroom being given information. They are out in the community getting their own information, and the teachers are not anymore feeding it to them. They are the ones that are actually guiding them in their learning. And so I'm hoping that in the next couple of years, we'll be able to bring far more of it to the community so that the community embraces it and supports this. I have to thank this community, the city as a whole, for supporting the $70 million bond for the new high school. It was something that was so needed, and had we not done it this year, we probably would not have our high school accredited, because it has been the second time in 10 years that the accreditors have brought that forward to us and said, you need a plan. And the city, thank God, as generous as you are, reacted to that and gave us a plan, or allowed us to go forward with that plan. So besides that, we've also, we have looked at personnel matters within the district. We know there have been problems. We know they have to be dealt with. And we are looking at them on the personnel committee and generally as a board, how to make sure those things don't happen again. I'm other than that, pre-K through, I am also on the task force, the pre-K task force, which is looking at pre-K education, which is in the school district, and getting out into the community, finding out what it is parents actually want. Because in the last iteration of the bond that was put out there to repair schools in the district, there was also put forward the idea of building 2 new pre-Ks, one at the north and one at the south end of the city. People in the district, in the city, were not happy with that, the building, and asked that we form a task force and go out and ask the community what exactly they wanted and look at other ways of bringing that without having to build 2 new buildings on either end of the city. So we are in the middle of that work. We have we don't have an online yet, but we're going to have an electronic survey that we're putting out to everyone in the city, and that is will be out within, I think, by the end of this week. And then also we have been looking, the facilities committee, of which Keith is on, has been also looking for other venues where we could move central office out of central office and have that building be a total pre-K center. So there are many ideas out there. They haven't come to any of them totally to fruition. And I know we've been asked to let people know what's going to happen with that building up there on Colchester Ave. We don't know yet. It is still, we're researching what we can do. So I'm not going to say probably much more since you want to hear about our budget. And
yeah, I think we do, and we don't have a whole lot of time. For a start, I'm wondering if you could tell the folks at home how they could get this information that we have in front of us here at this meeting, the proposed budget at a glance. I'm guessing that's online somewhere.
Yes, it is. Both of the annual report is online, and there are several different most frequently asked questions and sort of a one-page summary sheet of the budget are all online and can easily be found.
So they would Google Burlington's Vermont School District?
It would be Burlington's Burlington School District, yes.
That's great, thanks. Okay. So can you summarize where you are on the budget?
Okay. We're talking about. Okay, you have all the paperwork in front of you. It's a 4.36% increase. I think I'm in my 11th month, so I have a lot to learn. But I went back to when I stepped down from the board in 2014. I noticed in comparing that we're basically the same. We're within about 20 equalized students from where we were in 2013. So in other words, the number of our equalized per pupil students has not decreased or increased that significantly. Our ELL population has increased about 3%. I'm sorry. English language students has increased about 3%, and our special ed students have increased about 5%. One of the things that we noticed in looking at the students who are prepared for kindergarten, there's a readiness test for students who are prepared for kindergarten, that we are an outlier district in that we have a significantly higher number of students who are not prepared for kindergarten according to that assessment. That is what drove our thinking in preparing for this budget, where we really working at pre-K, making sure that the classrooms that the grant has gone away. We are going to fund that locally for the pre-K classrooms, put in support in for the kindergartens, and also to put in support for the English language students. And that's basically the kind of like the rationale for where the budget came from.
Great. Did you have anything to add, Kathy, or should we open up for questions?
People have questions.
Do people have questions about the school budget, proposed school budget? Everybody's looking very confused.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Keith. So you've itemized the 2.3 million, and what can you tell us about what you're going to be able to do about the 86 million that you haven't discussed?
What we have done within that 86 million, we have, Kathy and I both were very supportive of reducing what we considered overhead costs for the classroom. We were not as successful as we wanted to be. We got, I think it's about $800,000. The rest of that has to, the cost of that $86 million or $85 million budget you're talking about is the cost of personnel, the cost of supplies, the cost of upkeep of the buildings, the bond, upkeep of the buildings.
It is educating our children, the cost of that, and we also know that through poverty, through the raise in poverty of the children of this city, and a lot of social ills, the cost of educating our children is becoming more. We can't keep saying, okay, yes, cost of personnel and all those things raise every year. We can't keep them at a minimum or not increase them if we want to really educate our children. And so much more is falling on schools these days that normally should be falling on social services and health care and things like that. They aren't. The mental health of children in our schools is far more problematic than it was even 5 or 10 years ago, and those ills keep raising, and that is what is costing a lot more to educate our children these days.
So, Sharon, you had a question?
Yes. So if I was a parent who was sending my children to school, as I look at the reductions and the additions, how would this play out for my child? You're going to eliminate 3 FTEs for behavior coaches. I'm not sure what that means, but you're going to add 2 FTEs for elementary interventionists. So are the behavior coaches at all levels? Are they at K through 12, or were they focused on just elementary school? And so what would change for a parent or a child's experience based on this? And then the second part of the question is, can you just better define reduce non-instructional spending, which is $500,000? Thank you.
Okay, number one, the behavior coaches, they were elementary. They shared by 6 schools, so you can imagine a behavior coach going into a school not very consistently, having to know a large number of students. It seemed to be a program that wasn't being successful. So we're trying some other ways. I forgot the other part of the question.
500,000.
Oh, the interventionists. That's called that. Those are certified teachers, many with special education backgrounds, who work directly with students. Students in a classroom, working with a teacher, taking a small group of students, working with them. They may have behavior issues, they may have social issues, or they may just have academic issues. But they're to assist the teacher who doesn't have time to get to them at this.
Keep doing this. Sorry, Keith. So if you were in a classroom that had behavioral issues, are those just going to be unmet now? I guess that's what I'm really trying
Well,
to figure
you also
out.
notice that we are putting in full-time social workers. Right now, we do have social workers in each one of our elementary buildings, but they're not full-time. That's I think the administration's idea was that would be a better way to work with these children. And when we talk about behavior, there are needs that we need to figure out what it is that we can help them feel better about being happier about learning, in the classroom.
So the $500,000 for non-instructional spending, is that realistic? Can you really make that reduction, and what does that really mean?
That's what it's in. If you look in the report, I think he's really clear. The financial manager has specifically talked about what they are. We had a surplus for fiscal 18 of 1.1 million. We're hoping that he's got a good projection, and that non-instructional money will be able to be saved.
Thank you. Richard?
So just looking at the list of proposed additions, that total to $2.3 million.
Right.
Obviously, we've talked about a few of these things, but I know there was a much larger list that winnowed down.
It was up to $6 million.
So can you give us a kind of an overview of how you went about, or what is there a theme as to what you chose to include versus what was not included? What did you put to the side, and why did you keep these items?
I think we decided to set the priority at early education, early years in elementary. That was definitely where we thought we needed to put the most emphasis.
Yeah.
Some of our kindergarten classrooms have 22 students in them. We needed to put assistants in to help the teacher there. We wanted to make sure that our preschool classrooms that we've had previously funded by a total grant, that we were able to keep those. So that the whole idea was let's help the youngest get a good start.
Thank you.
And we know, too, that this is not fully what we need. This is what we thought the community would be able to afford.
Me? So I'd like to follow up my previous question. My point really was you got 86 million that you haven't talked about, and I know you've got to pay for property and personnel, etc. But if you manage that 1% better, then that's 860. It frees 860K. It frees up straight away. It's really important to manage the total 88 million, not just the the half a custodian or two paraeducators. It's much more important that you really get to grips with the 86 million. That's the crux of the spend. I'll move on from that. Keith, you talked about when you were on the school board before, and at that time, you and other people on Matson and Collins talked about a 5-year plan. Could you just talk about where that's got to? Thank you. It was committed. It was committed to the taxpayer. Thank you.
I don't think I ever believed in a 5-year plan. I don't know if Malin Matson said that, but with the students that are coming to us, there's no way we can ever predict what our needs are going to be from year to year. So it seems unrealistic to talk about a 5-year plan when you have students or groups of students coming to you with particular needs. The goal here is to try to manage what we have, to maintain our buildings we have with a capital plan, and that hopefully will give us some stability in the future regarding our budgets. But there's having a strategic. I think the strategic plan is part of the capital plan, but as far as being able to predict what our needs are going to be in 5 years, we're not going to be able to do that. Well, remember, we're not talking about computers, we're talking about human beings. I'm not going to disagree with you, Richard. I'm just going to tell you, present to you our budget. You can make your own decision.
Other questions, comments? Well, thank you for both of you. And I'm not sure where we're going to go here. Richard, do you have advice? You had conversations with the mayor's office. I just peered out in the hallway. I don't see anybody running down the hall.
He was expected to be there at 9 o'clock or just before.
Oh, I thought it was 8:45.
Between 8:45 and...
Okay, cool. So what's the group's pleasure? Do you want to, those of you who would like to stay and talk with the mayor, hang around, and others go, or we can all continue on another conversation for a few minutes? I'm at your service. What would you like to do? Or shoveling driveways. You can shovel mine too. Yeah. Yeah. You better get there because you got an hour and 10 minutes. Yeah. Oh, so thanks everyone, and some of us will stick around in case the mayor does get here.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for extending this, and those of you who have stuck around. Sorry I wasn't able to be here earlier in the evening. Sorry I missed the debate. Hope it went well. I basically came to talk about the ballot questions. I imagine maybe some discussion of it came up earlier in the night, but I thought I'd just try to briefly share a quick summary of how I see each of these ballot items. Really 2 through 5 are the ones I'm focused on, and then take questions you might have on them. I will say, I think I saw that Keith Pillsbury was on your agenda earlier, so you probably heard a full description of what ballot question number 1, the school tax budget tax increase is about. I will just share briefly, I'm supportive of that. I'll be voting yes, and appreciate that the district, I think, worked hard to both make new investments and try to constrain the rise of taxes. Similar exercise is what city has attempted to do consistently over the last 8 budgets. Can't believe that this is the 8th budget that I'll be bringing to the city, be responsible for. Ballot question number 2 is a vote about maintaining city services. There are not dramatic expansions projected of services, but we are trying to maintain the improvements that we've made in recent years. We are proud that this is just of the 8 budgets, this is just the 2nd time we are coming forward with a request for a property tax increase to fund city operations, sort of general fund services. And even with this 2nd tax increase, we, over that 8-year period of time, if you track if you sort of track how quickly the tax rate has risen versus inflation, we are still significantly below inflation over that 8-year period of time. This tax increase amounts to approximately $40 a year for the average Burlington household. That, believe it or not, that just that $40 generates significant new revenues for the city, about $600,000 in new revenues, which we will put to good use. Ballot question number 3 is about this multi-year effort that this administration and the city council have been working on towards cutting what Councilor Brian Prine likes to call it the Gordian knot of city government. It is reforming our land use permitting system. Fundamentally, what we have focused in on are 2 improvements that we think are going to make a big difference, especially for homeowners and small business owners, anyone who has had a negative experience in the past dealing with being able to get the right permissions and direction from the city with your improvements on your home. the intention is to change that here by doing two things. One, creating a one-stop shop, if you will, for all of your permit needs instead of having to go to multiple locations. And then secondly, maybe more significantly, taking all of the functions that have to do with land use permitting in the city, which are broken, the big functions are broken over 3 departments: planning and zoning, the building inspection services down at DPW, and code enforcement, which is the 3rd department. Good people in each of those departments, hardworking employees in each of those departments, but the system is fractured. Things get lost in the gaps and the spaces in between the departments. It will create a single point of accountability, one permitting and inspections department that funnels up to one department head appointed by the mayor, confirmed by the city council, and we're very hopeful that, looking at what other cities have done, that single point of accountability will improve the experience. There's some other less significant but still notable changes in this charter change. This is a charter change. 2, 3, and 4 are all charter changes. The other probably most notable additional thing is that when you take zoning away from planning and zoning, you're left with the question of what do you do with the planning department? And we grappled with that a lot as a city council and administration, and what we have settled on is keeping, at least for now, is keeping the planning department as a standalone small department. But we we think there's some gains to be made instead of it being sort of this island within city government, not really tied in with the rest of the administration, accountable really directly to the independent planning commission. The hope here is that we can make our planning efforts more relevant, more tied in with implementation, and more efficient instead of having sometimes multiple kind of parallel planning efforts by making that department headed as well by a mayoral appointee, again, confirmed by the planning commission. And confirmed by the city council. Importantly, nothing about this changes the important statutory role that the planning commission continues to play as an independent body, signing off on zoning changes and signing off on the changes to the municipal plan. Happy to answer questions about that one too. There's a lot there. Number 4 is about this downtown improvement district. I imagine this may have come up in the debate previously. I know this is probably the one item that I'm hearing the most kind of discussion of and questions about. From my perspective, this charter change is about strengthening our downtown. We have had a very successful run on Church Street Marketplace with the active management of the Church Street Marketplace for the last 30 years. This would expand, excuse me, fighting a little bit of a cold. This would expand that active management to the entire downtown. People ask why. We see this as important to do now, given the new threats the downtown faces from the internet, from neighboring communities that are making advances with their retail and downtown efforts. This is something we think is critical to be done to keep Burlington strong into the future. Ballot question number 5, last one I'll hit and then we'll open it up, is one that I have not heard a lot of discussion about. I think most people, certainly the council, unanimously thought this was an important idea and one whose time has come. We are phasing out a tax on investment known as, it's got a kind of funny name, the business personal property tax. Funny name in that this isn't personal property. This is about investments that businesses make here in Burlington that get taxes as if they were real estate. This used to be a fairly popular tax. Many communities have it. Many of them have phased this tax out in recent decades because it has shown itself to be a disincentive to investment on assets that are very easy to move around and take to other communities. We have found a way to phase this tax out over the next 8 years with very little impact on other taxpayers. Basically, the phase out is fairly backloaded, and most of these revenues, which are not trivial, it's about $1 million of revenues, a little more than $1 million of revenues that come from this tax. Most of those revenues are phased out when the waterfront TIF district expires, and the city will get an infusion of new revenues in the year 2026. So we think this is a way to get rid of a problematic tax that threatens to lose jobs and investment from Burlington, and do so in a way that has minimal impact on you and other property taxpayers. Hopefully I kept that concise, and I guess I always find it kind of exciting when we have a full town meeting day ballot. I think it's a sign of a lot of work and collaboration between the city council and the administration when we're able to bring these forward. It's also a reminder that Burlington has this really interesting system of both representative democracy and direct democracy, and voters have the ultimate authority on many, many items. Anytime we have any kind of structural change to our government, which is what these charter changes are, you are the ultimate authority and get to weigh in. We hope you we hope you like where we're headed, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you have concerns.
Mayor, maybe I'll
Great.
kind of shoot a question at you that came up earlier, not necessarily in our debate, but it did come up as part of Speak Out. And there was a question about, isn't, talking about the DID,
yep.
Isn't this privatizing downtown? That was one question. And then there's another question about kind of gentrification. Is this raising rents, making it, a less inclusive city?
Great. Apologies again. Those are the two critiques that I have here, and I think it's a good debate. I'm a little mystified by the characterization of this as privatization of the downtown, in that there are no public assets that will be transferred from the city to this new downtown investment district, which will be this nonprofit-run entity, and there are no governmental authorities which are being divested from the city council and administration to private entity. So I find that attack on this misleading. I also find the concerns about gentrification misplaced for a couple reasons. One, the way this is being structured, there will be no direct financial impact on residents in the downtown. Even if you're in this district, which is essentially the entire downtown, the additional tax that this district will be able to assess to make promotions and beautification of elements of the downtown, that assessment will not be on residential properties. It will only be on essentially commercial properties, businesses. And when I say commercial, sometimes commercial properties include multifamily apartments. In this case, they don't. Residents will pay no direct fees. There is certainly many of these districts around the country, and there are hundreds of them. It's a very popular way of having a positive impact on an urban area. Sometimes they succeed and they make a place a more appealing place. And there can be, when you hear these concerns and people say there are these studies that show the rents increase, well, they have succeeded in making these more appealing, more attractive places where people want to be. And sometimes that can have a positive impact, can elevate rents. I think that is a small driver, even in these areas that are referenced in terms of rent increases. We know what really drives gentrification, what really drives an increase in rent is this tension between supply and demand. And this is something I think we're just starting to have broader awareness of in the city and around the country. What causes gentrification is not when areas are improved, when new building is done. What causes gentrification is when you don't build, when you don't meet rising demand, when there's no supply that's created. That, I think, is a problem we have struggled with in Burlington for a long time. I think we are a very appealing place to live. People want to be here, of all sorts of different households, younger households, older households. It's a unique experience within Vermont, living in Burlington, particularly in the downtown, and demand has been rising steeply for a long time. We have not kept up with that, and that, I think, has been the fundamental driver why Burlington has become a less and less affordable place to live. Getting to the point where we did a study a few years ago showing that the average Burlingtonian was spending 44% of their income on rent, which is not a normal situation. Most American cities don't have a ratio like that. That is why, a major, as some of you may know and some of you may not agree, a major push of this administration working with the City Council has been to try to address that, look for opportunities within the downtown where homes could be created. I think that is a far better strategy for stopping gentrification, reversing gentrification, than saying no to a group of business owners that want to make improvements and beautifications to the downtown.
I hope you don't mind. I just want to add two quick things to that response. I want to take a second just to read from the charter change language. And I hope that you all do read the charter change language, because there will be opinions out there, there will be campaigns that will be ran. But one thing you can trust is, at least hopefully, the language in the law, especially unambiguous language, like what I'll read right now. And this is from the section in the charter change language that is about powers and duties of both the DID and the city, right? This is the brass tack stuff that matters. It reads, the city will, and I'm quoting here, the city will control the use of the public right-of-way, including streets, sidewalks, and other publicly owned space within the DID. That language, from my perspective, is not ambiguous. We should now more than ever try to be operating from a shared basis of fact. That to claim that this is in some way privatizing public space is a deviation from fact. And I cannot emphatically say that enough, because of everything else that is going on in our country, where we live in a world of alternative facts. We should not live in that world here in Burlington. And just one more thing on this point of gentrification, because this is important. And having spent 2 years with this project, we were laser focused on these sorts of issues. These concerns are very legitimate about privatization, about gentrification, about rising costs of living. Of course, those concerns are correct to have, but you have to recognize, if you're going to be informed, how they were also addressed. And I just want to remind folks that while not in this policy, within the Downtown Improvement District area, now that we had a meeting here a few weeks ago where I gave a presentation where you can remember the map, it's essentially the downtown. Within the DID and one block surrounding the DID, there are over 750 homes within the downtown that, through various social housing programs, are perpetually rent stabilized. So whether it's this DID or whether it's not rising demand and supply not meeting that demand, any of those factors are not going to be impacting these homes. So any claims of rampant, unfettered gentrification is simply ignoring the reality of long-standing, forward-thinking, progressive housing policy that protects against these sorts of things. As you could tell, I could probably go on and on. I will not, and I will cede the mic to Sharon Busher.
Thank you. So I just wanted to let people know, the mayor knows, that on one of the proposals that's before you, the Department of Permitting and Inspections, that's something that I totally support, that consolidation. However, in that process, I think I have great concern about the dividing of the zoning administrator and the planning director and the planning department. I feel that they work collaboratively. They've functioned very importantly for us, and I am concerned about that. Initially, planning was going to become part of CEDO in one proposal. That has not happened yet, so it's standalone, as the mayor stated. But ultimately, I ended up saying no. It's very hard when a question has multiple outcomes, because I wanted to say yes to the one department, but I didn't feel okay about planning and zoning being separated. I feel like I spend a lot of time in that area of the world, not as much as some of the other people in the room maybe, but I do spend a fair amount of time, and I see the collaboration, and I see how they need to be there for each other, and the separation, just the mere separation, the distance. If it was in one building, maybe it would be different, but the sheer separation, I think, will become a barrier, and I'm concerned about outcomes. The planning department is really important, and zoning, obviously, planning sets policy, zoning administrator administrates that policy, but you really need to understand each other to make good policy and to understand how it's being administered. And so time will tell, but I just wanted to alert you to the fact that I am concerned about this and would have felt better with a different model. Thank you.
This is interesting. Mayor, yeah. Yeah, I should be on a short leash, yeah. Mayor, about 5 or 6 years ago, Alan Matson and Jean Collins from the school district committed to put together a 5-year strategic plan, which Keith just told us it can't possibly be put together. That's another story. But what about the city? Does the city have a 5-year strategy that you work to, that you would like to share with the residents? I mean, I've done quite a lot of this,
right.
and I'm just very interested. You know, who's your R&D, for instance? What's going to happen to the city? Is that anything you share with the residents? I'd be interested to hear.
Well, absolutely. It's an interesting question, Richard. I mean, we do a lot of planning in the city. Sometimes people feel like we do too much planning and not enough doing. We try to get the balance right there. We have this formal way that we are required by law to do that addresses one element, at least, of our planning, which is the municipal development plan, which we refer to these days as Plan BTV, and we're actually in the latter stages of approval and we do this, I believe. I'm looking to Councilor Busher as the great fact checker of the city. I believe it's a 5-year. It becomes a 5-year plan. It's formally got to be updated by law every 5 years, and we're in the process of doing that. I think I'm really. I say this as someone who has a planning degree. I have some skepticism about a lot of land use planning. I think we're fortunate to have a very skilled planning department that has really worked hard to create plans that are relevant to people's lives, that engage actual issues we're grappling with, and that have, in many cases, led then to changes in policy and changes on the ground. This version of it is, I think, an impressive update. It doesn't change a whole lot of policy, but it does really clarify and simplify, I think, where we're headed, and it's got maps that back this up that say, in a really interesting way, here are the areas that we are looking for growth, that we want to see, that we as a city kind of agree with the notion that I was expressing further, that if we're going to stay the inclusive, vibrant, successful city that we are, city of opportunity, we need to see new investment being made. And that area, I think, is colored in orange on the plan, and then there's an area that's colored in yellow, which really covers a lot of the residential neighborhoods where The plan is very clear that we're looking there is primarily about preservation of what's there, maybe with some modest incremental changes like accessory dwelling units is something that's being debated right now. And then there is a big green section of the plan that where we really are looking to conserve and keep open. And those maps kind of reinforce something else we've been talking about in recent weeks. That is another plan that your city councilor maybe came up earlier. Richard Dean has really been a leader on. We are unusual in that 50% of our city is open space. Of that, half are these really wild areas. And that's I think I think we're very fortunate. I think it's one of the things that makes Burlington such a great place is that we have that combination and that we have worked to have that balance. So that's one area of planning. Another area of planning that is in the news these days is our walk bike master plan, something we're a couple years into, a 15-year plan there. That thinking in that plan drove a lot of the quick build pedestrian and bicycle improvements, for example, that we saw last year. So I'm not sure if I'm getting at the heart of what you were looking for there, but those are a couple of the major planning efforts that we kind of formally pursue together as a city.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the questions that came up, one of the questions that came up in the debate, and I don't want to get into the weeds, but was sort of divisiveness in the city, and I think that's a fair characterization. But is part of that due to the fact that there's a sort of an amorphous plan, not to you maybe, but to most of the public, and then all of a sudden the rubber hits the road and people don't really feel as if they're up to speed with it. And I just wonder what we can do to create a sort of smoother lead time into getting issues into the public domain, or the public awareness. Not the domain.
Yeah. So that is that is a very interesting point. I do tend to think that certainly when it comes to some of these land use issues, what you want is a kind of robust debate and exchange of ideas at the kind of planning and policy setting stage, where you agree on what is the form and what do we want the land use policies to be about in the future, and then you set policy and then when you actually get to specific projects coming forward, that you've already had that debate and it doesn't become about specific projects. I think that's an ideal many people would like to see happen. Our form-based code is an attempt to do exactly that, to sort of really lay out very prescriptively, this is the type of downtown, this is the type of building form that we want, and we're setting that as policy, and then permits should kind of flow naturally from that. We shouldn't have to debate each individual project. I'm not sure we've fully achieved that, but we have been trying to make some steps in that direction. I think part of the other, I also think I see some of these debates as a sign of the health of our democracy and the fact that we have so many people who care so deeply about the city, and we don't always all necessarily agree. That's probably a healthy thing, that we don't just all kind of have a unity of thought, that we debate these things out. And I hope when people step back, they still see a city that is advancing and improving in many areas.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to suggest we have one more question and then ask that you stick around if people want to have an informal conversation after we let some people get home.
It was not a question. Sorry, Sharon. State law requires a municipal development plan to be updated once every 8 years.
Sorry to get that. I wasn't sure if it was 5 or 10, or I guess it was 8. Great. Thanks for clarifying.
8.
So do we have any other questions? Thank you. Thank you, councilors and candidates, not here, I guess, and school board members and the public. And we're going to be working. We didn't have a time this meeting, but next meeting, we want to talk about how to involve those of you that are at home so that perhaps you can be more engaged in the moment. We want to just try to get some live streaming going, but I need somebody significantly younger than me to help me with that, so we're working on that. And we're also looking for more active involvement in the NPA. So if there are those of you that are interested in being more involved, please let Richard and myself know. And thanks, and be careful out there. It's a little slippery on the sidewalks.